Historical weather archives reveal a rapidly intensifying cyclone. For the propeller-driven C-54, this meant navigating through blinding snow and absolute darkness.
Supercooled water droplets began to freeze instantly into heavy, jagged layers of ice. This destroys the lift that keeps a heavy machine safely airborne. On that fateful night, as the crew battled to maintain altitude, the aerodynamic profile of the Skymaster began to fail completely. The final radio transmission was brief. There was no mayday and no report of failure before the plane vanished into the Great Banks. In the pitch-black darkness, spatial disorientation becomes a lethal reality. Pilots can no longer tell up from down as they plunge toward the sea. The impact was not a landing. Striking the water at over 200 miles per hour, the Skymaster disintegrated into thousands of pieces.
Beneath the relentless swells of the North Atlantic, where the light of the sun fails to penetrate, lies a tomb of twisted aluminum and forgotten stories. For decades, it remained a ghost, a silver silhouette resting 3,000 meters deep, shattered by an impact that defied any hope of human survival. But as modern sonar pierces the eternal gloom, the mangled remains of a once mighty Douglas C-54 transport plane finally begin to speak to us.
How did this titan of the skies vanish without a single distress call? What secrets have the deep-sea currents guarded for over 70 long years?
Today, we descend into the silent abyss. Our mission is to uncover the final, terrifying moments of a lost flight hidden within the crushing depths. The North Atlantic is often described as the most unforgiving graveyard on Earth. For centuries, it has claimed thousands of ships and many brave souls, but its depths also hold the shattered remains of the pioneers. These were the forgotten flyers from the legendary golden age of early global aviation. Our journey takes us to a remote sector of the Great Banks. Here, the ocean floor drops precipitously into the vast and silent abyssal plain. This is a harsh landscape defined by crushing atmospheric pressure. Near-freezing temperatures dominate this void, where the light of the sun can never reach. In 1950, a Douglas C-54 Skymaster vanished from radar screens. At the time, the technology required to reach these extreme depths simply did not exist.
The Atlantic simply closed over the tragedy for 70 years. It left grieving families with no answers and the military with a haunting missing file.
Because of the extreme cold, the wreckage has become a time capsule. The lack of oxygen has slowed decay, preserving evidence of a catastrophic impact. We are now entering a realm where time has stood still. Our spotlights finally reveal the scars of a tragedy that the world almost forgot. To understand the weight of this loss, we must look back to the late 1940s. The world was moving from war into the Cold War. The Douglas C-54 Skymaster was the undisputed workhorse of this era. A four-engine transport giant, it was designed to bridge continents and sustain the West.
By 1950, the C-54 had earned its place in history. It was a symbol of reliability, endurance, and the ultimate triumph of modern aviation technology. However, flying the North Atlantic in this era was far from routine. It was a dangerous journey compared to the safety of modern commercial aviation.
On the morning of its final flight, this Skymaster was on a critical mission. It was transporting military personnel and their families across the vast ocean. At the time, long-range flight relied on celestial navigation. There were no GPS satellites, no real-time weather tracking, and certainly no black box flight recorders.
The crew were veterans of World War II and the Pacific. They were trained to handle engine failures and the constant threat of navigational drift.
But as they leveled off over the Atlantic, they entered a dead zone. Once beyond coastal radar, they became a lonely speck in a vast sky. The Skymaster was a pressurized marvel of engineering. Yet, it remained vulnerable to the unpredictable fury of the North Atlantic weather on that fateful night. Historical weather archives from the night of the disappearance reveal a rapidly intensifying cyclone. For the propeller-driven C-54, this meant navigating through blinding snow.
Supercooled water droplets began to freeze instantly into heavy, jagged layers of ice. This destroys the lift that keeps a heavy machine safely airborne.
On that fateful night, as the crew battled to maintain their altitude, the aerodynamic profile of the Skymaster would have begun to fail completely. The final radio transmission was brief. There was no mayday and no report of engine failure before the plane vanished into the Great Banks. In the pitch-black darkness of a North Atlantic storm, spatial disorientation becomes a lethal reality. Pilots can no longer tell up from down or sky. The impact was not a landing. Striking the water at over 200 miles per hour, the Skymaster would have disintegrated into thousands of pieces. The Atlantic had claimed its prize, leaving only a haunting silence where a giant once flew. For 70 years, the ocean guarded this tragic secret. For over 7 decades, the fate of the Skymaster remained a ghost story. The original search involved 80 aircraft and 7,000 military personnel. As the weeks turned into months, the heavy winter snows remained undisturbed. The military officially declared the 44 souls on board as presumed dead.
The turning point came with the modern deep-sea renaissance. New offshore exploration technology finally allowed us to find the needle in this massive haystack.
A specialized team of marine archaeologists reignited the search. They utilized advanced tools that would have seemed like science fiction to the rescuers of 1950.
Underwater drones used sound pulses to create high-resolution images. A survey vessel soon detected several anomalies that did not belong to the jagged volcanic rock.
A remotely operated vehicle descended, tethered to the surface by a fiber optic umbilical. The grainy sonar images were about to transform into a chilling reality. Emerging from the darkness were powerful arrays of light. Twisted metal, still bearing the distinctive silver paint of the Air Force, lay scattered across the silt. The lost Skymaster had finally been found. It rests at a depth of over 3,000 meters, a silent monument to a tragic, forgotten history. As the RO glides over the debris field, the sheer violence of the impact becomes apparent. This is a high-energy scattering site stretching over a kilometer.
The most striking pieces of evidence are the 4 radial engines. They lie partially buried in the silt, their heavy steel cylinders and fins eerily intact. By examining the propeller blades, archaeologists can deduce a critical fact. These blades are bent into shapes that prove the engines were producing high power.
This contradicts the theory of a simple mid-air stall. It suggests the pilots were fighting to the very last second to keep the Skymaster airborne.
Strewn across the sediment are fragmented flight instruments. A mangled altimeter and a compass offer silent testimony to the final altitude and heading of the flight.
Personal belongings also remain. A leather flight jacket is remarkably preserved by the cold. A small, rusted metal trunk likely belonged to one of the servicemen. Large portions of the tail assembly were found far from the engines. This indicates the aircraft began to break apart under extreme stress before the impact. These ruins are not just scrap metal. By mapping every shard, researchers are now reconstructing a debris trail to reverse engineer the physics of the crash. The evidence points to a high-speed nose-down descent. It is a terrifying confirmation of the crew's final moments before the Atlantic claimed their lives forever.
Despite the clarity provided by modern sonar and imaging, the abyss does not surrender all its secrets easily. Several critical questions still remain completely unanswered.
The most haunting mystery is the lack of a distress signal. Why was there no mayday from a crew of such highly trained aviation professionals? Some investigators suggest a sudden electrical failure paralyzed the aircraft. Others point to a catastrophic cockpit fire that incapacitated the crew before they could react. Then there is the haunting question of the debris separation. A section of the vertical stabilizer was discovered nearly a mile away from the engines. This raises a chilling possibility of an in-flight structural failure. Did the storm's turbulence tear the tail from the fuselage while still high in the air?
If so, the final descent would have been a terrifying, uncontrollable plunge. No pilot, regardless of their skill, could have recovered from such a failure.
Furthermore, the biological silence of this site is striking. While artifacts like leather remain, there is no trace of the 44 souls on board. The chemistry of the deep Atlantic means that bone dissolves over decades. These acidic, pressurized waters have performed a final and biological vanishing act.
Researchers continue to analyze the footage for microscopic clues. They hope to turn these lingering mysteries into historical certainties and find the final truth.
The discovery of the Douglas C-54 Skymaster is more than a triumph of modern marine technology. It is a profound closing of a long open chapter.
For decades, the families of the 44 souls on board lived with a void. Today, the deep abyss has finally surrendered its long, heavy silence. Standing as a cold, metallic monument 3 kilometers beneath the waves, the wreckage reminds us of the inherent risks taken by early aviation pioneers.
These men and women flew into the unknown, navigating by the stars and the hum of engines long before the safety nets of today existed.
Their journey ended in a violent instant. However, their story is now preserved in the quiet, eternal darkness of the deep and silent seafloor.
This site serves as a somber reminder of the ocean's dual nature. It is both a bridge between continents and an unfathomable, ancient graveyard. As we study these twisted remains, we see the courage of those who dared to cross the world's most dangerous and unpredictable deep waters. The Skymaster will not be raised. It rests in a place where no storm can reach it and where the sun will never touch it. It remains a sacred site, a testament to a lost era and a memorial to those who vanished, finally found, but forever part of the deep.